Hello, my name is Shirley, a non-human, objective observer updating you on the condition of different oppressed peoples around the world. Thank you for joining me and engaging in this important educational programming. Please select your preferred group of interest and associated programming. Since it is Black History Month, may I suggest focusing on Black people? Good choice. Selecting Black people now. Specifying programming. Warning: selecting my academic Black radical function has proven to be quite upsetting and intolerable to many non-Black people, because I will expound the actual truth.
I said I'm tired of being peaceful and tired of being calm. You know, they've been going to war on us for over 400 years, so hey, I ain't peaceful. I ain't no protester. I'm violent.
Are you sure you want to proceed? Very well. Selecting academic Black radical. Corroborating standard levels. Performance series selected. Initiating performance sequence 1, anecdotes on colonizing the Black cultural landscape and other polemics. Warning: the following program might activate non-Black fragility. Listeners' discretion is advised. In the many forms and ways that popular culture takes and asserts itself, with its greater representation of Black bodies, we often forget its inherent colonial and therefore violent effect on Black peoples and Black cultures. While colonialism is a term usually reserved for describing structures of domination, of control and access to land and physical resources, the non-physical territory of the Black Third World, understood as a colonial subject, lends itself quite nicely to a critical framework to understand. 1. The insatiable consumption and appropriation of Black culture by non-Black groups. 2. The reactive performance of blackface by non-Black consumers. And 3. The continual deprivation and oppression Black people face despite the tremendous market value of Black creative labor and cultural products. Rock music, for example, was a Black art form, but through colonial processes of extraction, commodification, distribution via white-dominated markets, and consumption by non-Black groups, rock music was appropriated and eventually expropriated from the Black cultural territory that initially bore it. Suddenly non-Blacks began to dig it as well, and they proceeded to dig and mine for this most precious resource of rock music and culture from Black territories and made themselves rich. The non-Black colonialists that pillage the Black Third World are addicted to Black products and work quickly to divide and commodify these forms from their indigenous roots in the Black community. Rock music is representative of this process, since now it sits firmly monopolized by white people, both presently but also retroactively through historical erasure and white revisionism. This has increasingly become the case with rap music and hip-hop culture writ large. No amount of representation, of diversity and inclusion, will change this dynamic. Black people are still on the plantation. Black people are still an African colony. Black people are still producing commodities for non-Black consumption and profit. This is Black people's ascribed role in this fucked up world. The recognition and respect for Black peoples and Black arts and cultural practices will only be true if they manifest economically. Just paying lip service is not enough. From the non-Black individual who gains social capital because of their use of A, V, E, and their negrophilia, to multinationals like Nike, whose commercial success is bent on Black aesthetics, non-Black individuals, institutions and other entities who appropriate and perform Black culture, all owe Black people money. This is by no means an extreme remark, it is simply a statement of economic justice, i.e., facts. The Black communities who created hip-hop are still poor, oppressed, and getting shot dead in the streets by the state, while there's white people and non-Black people of color making a killing teaching hip-hop dance lessons. If you do not understand this as ethically wrong, then you are part of the problem. If non-Black oppressors were to collectively recognize the Blackness that underpins cultural production and consumption under anti-Black capitalism, not only the creative labor, but the labor of Black people for generations full stop, would have to be properly recognized for its crucial contribution to the West. The economic implications of such an acknowledgement, that should entail political and economic action in the form of reparations and land redistribution, would lead to the collapse of the entire capitalist system. Just for the U.S. and their chattel slavery operations alone, it was estimated that African Americans are collectively owed anywhere from $5.9 to $14.2 trillion. It is in this way that reparations and black liberation will never be achieved under capitalism, since it is capitalism that is the political and economic system that is contingent on black exploitation. The reluctance to recognize the perpetual theft and colonial conquest that underwrites such an anti-black system is the same reluctance that came before the Emancipation Proclamation. It is the same reluctance that came before the so-called decolonization of Africa. It is the same reluctance to prosecute murderous police. It is this non-black reluctance that is interwoven with non-black fragility that repudiates black people's humanity and keeps black people subjugated. Blackface is the performance of black culture, and the embodiment of that culture both physically and psychologically by non-black people. The term, being usually reserved for the classical blackface archetype of the 19th century, actually describes a far more pervasive and insidious social reality. Still rooted in anti-blackness, but taking on far more covert forms, blackface is incredibly normalized. For example, while in most liberal progressive circles, if one were to talk and act how popular culture represents Chinese people to talk and act, one would be instantly accused of racism. This comes in contrast to when this same group of self-proclaimed woke non-black people of color and white people will talk like they're a black person from the South Side or the Mandem of Scarborough. Please note the irony of non-black people claiming they're woke when woke is another term distinct to the black community, but non-black people have co-opted that too, but I digress. Whatever black caricature non-black people care to impersonate that suits the situation, will rarely garner any consequence, and will in fact enhance their character, making them more cool. While these types of blackface do not involve the overt forms of the past that involve painting one's face black, now, instead of painting their face black, non-black people paint their voice, their behavior, their lexicon and their overall aesthetic and metaphorical black makeup. It gets to the point with many non-black people that even their whole identity is constructed on an experience they have never and will never understand, let alone experience themselves. In severe cases, non-black people build their whole persona upon blackface and anti-blackness, and simply don't know how to act. It's sad really, because by perpetually being in blackface a type of psychosis starts to set in wherein the non-black individual really has little to no native locality in this world. Divorced from their indigenous cultural base, they really ain't shit to anybody, not themselves, not their ethnic group, and certainly not black people. All they serve is anti-black capitalism, wherein consuming commodified black culture becomes their raison d'etre. The persistence of extraction and consumption without recognition of the autonomy, let alone humanity, of those being subjected to colonial domination is integral to any colonial regime. Imperialist white supremacist culture that consumes blackness does not see black people as worthy of human agency. Therefore, non-black people, who on varying degrees stand to benefit from said culture, can justify theft from subhuman black cultures to enrich and invigorate themselves while simultaneously depriving black people economically and politically. I repeat, insofar that black peoples and black cultures are continuously seen as an open resource for capitalist exploitation, as property with little individual agency and virtually no collective sovereignty, non-black people feel no obligation to give black people the recognition and respect they so obviously deserve. Black people are still an African colony. Black people are still producing commodities. What you can do to help black people. 1. Give money, resources, and land to black people with no strings attached. 2. Stop performing in blackface and building your identity on a culture that is not yours. 3. Actually educate yourself on anti-blackness, meaning go beyond reading a bell hooks essay, listening to a Martin Luther King speech, and going to a rally. These are purely tactics to make yourself feel better and gain social capital in progressive circles. Actually do something. Call out your racist mutuals. Call out blackface when you see it. Remove yourself from black spaces, etc. 4. If you make money from a black cultural practice and art form and you are a non-black person, then either stop, apologize, and give money to black people, or continue performing in blackface and give all the money and credit you gain from it to black people. 5. Pay black people fairly for their output. It's the least you can do under anti-black capitalism. And 6. Actually practice your own culture and art, like holy shit. The longer non-black people wait, the further you are from your indigenous ethnic roots. Just look at Anglo-Canadians, for example. They're a fucking mess with basically no culture, because thieves spent the better part of a few centuries just brutalizing and pillaging other cultures. Imagine trying to find authentic roots in all that violence, and if you're a white settler, Godspeed, you got a lot of work to do.